Yesterday, we put out a video right after Apple's November 10th event, helping you guys decide which new Apple Silicon M1 Mac to buy. But we didn't answer the question of if you should actually upgrade from an Intel-based MacBook to one of these new M1 MacBooks. So in this video, I'm gonna do just that, because for some use cases, the answer might actually surprise you. And I'm gonna start off with the MacBook Air before I move on to the big boy MacBook Pro that more of you guys are excited for based on a poll we ran this morning. But before we get into it, I wanna mention that we've already ordered 4 models of the new M1 Macs that we're gonna be testing. So click the subscribe button below to help us reach our goal of 500K subs before the end of the year. The MacBook Air has always had a couple of goals in mind. It had to be thin, it had to be light, and it had to give you reliable access to the web and common apps with decent performance and at a lower price than the rest of Apple's MacBooks. The previous Intel-based 2020 MacBook Air nailed almost all of those things. The main issue was overheating that led to sluggish performance and loud fan noise while doing basic things like being in a Zoom call. Well, the new M1 MacBook Air fixes that because it has no fan at all, which means absolutely zero fan noise. But what about overheating? Since the M1 chip uses the same architecture as the chip in your iPhone or your iPad, it's extremely efficient. It also means that you can use your iPhone or iPad apps right on your MacBook Air, like games and any other app made by a developer who doesn't opt out of being included on these new Macs. And because it's so efficient like an iPad, if you're doing basic tasks like browsing the web, watching videos, and joining Zoom calls, I highly doubt that it'll get even close to overheating. And because of that iPhone-based architecture, I believe that most people who choose to buy the MacBook Air should just stick to 8GB of RAM, because it uses and manages the RAM more efficiently than Intel x86 processors do. If you think about it, people who buy the Air usually require lighter workloads and don't use the same professional apps that use up more RAM, unlike users who buy the MacBook Pro. The MacBook Air is more meant for people like students and teachers who use apps like Word and Excel, or business owners who use business-based apps like QuickBooks, as well as browsing the web to do things like replying to emails or watching videos. And what's great is that the M1 chip should do very well for those people who want to edit some photos using the Air's upgraded P3 wide color gamut display, or maybe even edit some 4K video. It's gonna perform much better than any previous Intel-based MacBook Air. Now, one of the biggest concerns about the switch to the new ARM architecture is the lack of software support for third-party apps during the transition period. But a lot of MacBook Air users don't really use third-party apps that require a ton of performance anyway. And for the lighter apps that haven't made the switch just yet to ARM, Rosetta 2 on-the-fly emulation is gonna handle them with ease. And by far, the most important upgrade is the extra battery life that you get with the new M1 MacBook Air, going from 11 hours of web browsing to 15. And that's what truly matters to those who like to take their MacBook into the classroom or into the Starbucks lobby. And as an added bonus, we get Wi-Fi 6 support for the first time on a MacBook. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there has never been a better time to upgrade to a MacBook Air from an old one than right now, even if you're upgrading from the 2020 Intel MacBook that was released in March, because this new M1 chip is an absolute game changer for the things that matter the most to the MacBook Air: snappy performance, a silent and cool design, reliability, and battery life. So there's your answer for the MacBook Air, but now let's get into the Pro, which is meant for extended performance workloads because of the built-in fan and a number of improvements like the built-in touch bar, a larger trackpad, a brighter 500 nit display compared to 400 on the Air, studio quality microphones, better speakers with high dynamic range, a larger 61 watt power brick compared to 30 on the Air, and of course, an extra 2 hours of battery life on top of the Airs. Answering the upgrade question for the MacBook Pro is a whole different ballgame because there were 3 different Intel models of the Pro. The base 13-inch for $1,300, the higher-end 13-inch for $1,800, and the 16-inch Pro for $2,400. The answer to the question of if you should upgrade matters based on which one of those you're coming from, and it matters based on exactly what you do with your MacBook Pro. For example, if you currently own an eGPU to boost your graphics performance, that support is going away with the new M1 Max, so you're gonna have to sacrifice that if you upgrade. That might seem like a bummer for those who use eGPUs for video editing, but there's a chance that this new M1 chip will perform close to or just as well as an eGPU because of the new hardware encoders and decoders, as well as the extreme efficiency improvements of having a unified architecture, which drastically reduces the latency of data moving between the various components that are now within one single chip, compared to data traveling to and from an eGPU through a Thunderbolt cable to the CPU. But we're just gonna have to see how well it works next week. Now, on the other hand, if you're currently using Boot Camp to load up Windows 10 to use specific programs or to play x86 games, that feature is also going away with the new M1 Max, so you probably won't want to upgrade right now. However, Parallels have confirmed that they're working on support for the M1 chip, and Microsoft has also announced an emulation layer for Windows on ARM, so there's a good chance that you'll be able to run some form of Windows sooner than we originally thought. But the reality for now is that these new M1 Max will only be able to run x86 games that were already available on the Mac. But on top of that, they'll be able to run every single iPhone and iPad game like Call of Duty Mobile, Genshin Impact, and the future League of Legends Wild Rift, as long as the developers of those games don't specifically opt out of being available on the Apple Silicon Macs. So for higher end games like that, you'll be able to use a game controller, or potentially a keyboard and mouse, which Apple introduced for the iPad at this year's WWDC. But for simpler and more casual games, Apple's automatic touch-to-click translation feature will take care of it. But other than ditching eGPU and Windows Boot Camp support, not that much is changing. The only other thing to consider is how many professional third-party apps you use, because for some time, those apps are not going to run natively, so it's going to be up to Rosetta 2 translation to run them. And of course, we don't yet know how well that works. Like for example, the native ARM version of Lightroom is only coming next month, with the new Photoshop only coming next year. So if you mainly use apps that haven't yet been updated for ARM, you should probably hold off on upgrading for the time being, because those apps won't run as well under Rosetta, and they're not going to be as good in terms of RAM management. So maybe the maximum 16 gigs of RAM might be cutting it for third-party x86 apps. However, if you use Apple's native apps like Final Cut, Logic Pro, and Xcode, or other apps that are running natively, the 16 gigs of RAM is going to be less of an issue due to better RAM management, and those apps are going to run incredibly well, and I'm 100% confident that this new M1 MacBook Pro for $1,300 is gonna easily outperform the $2,000 Intel i7 MacBook Pro that you can still buy right now. But I don't think that it'll outperform the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So people who have one of those obviously shouldn't upgrade, and they should wait until the Apple Silicon model next year. But anyone who uses mostly Apple's apps with any Intel 13-inch MacBook Pro, even a $2,000 model, shouldn't worry about upgrading. However, there are a couple of downsides with the new M1 MacBook Pro coming from that high-end model, like going from 4 Thunderbolt ports down to 2, and supporting only one display, and only getting a maximum of 16 gigs of RAM. But keep in mind that this M1 MacBook Pro is meant to replace the $1,300 base MacBook Pro, which also had 2 Thunderbolt ports and a maximum of 16 gigs of RAM. But to sweeten the deal, Apple is adding extra features like Wi-Fi 6 support, studio quality microphones, and a massive 7 hours of extra battery life while browsing the web, which is incredible to have. So just to wrap up my final answer, anyone with any Intel MacBook Air model should absolutely upgrade if you're considering it, because there is very little downside and massive amounts of upside with the new M1 chip. And anyone with an older Intel 13-inch MacBook Pro should definitely upgrade unless they really care about 4 different things: using an eGPU, using Windows 10 Boot Camp, having 4 Thunderbolt ports, and if you spend a lot of time with third-party x86 apps that haven't been updated to run natively on ARM just yet. But other than those 4 things, I think you're gonna have a much better experience with the new MacBook Pro. And if you're curious about the new M1 chip, definitely subscribe right now, because I'm gonna be working on an M1 chip explained video literally right after I finish shooting this one. And by the way, we already ordered 4 of these new M1 chip Macs, and we're gonna be testing and reviewing them, so click the circle above to subscribe to help us reach our goal of 500K subs by the end of the year. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.